assured that I'm sustainable. That I can continue from one session to the next without boring you too much, I hope. It's a smooth transition. The previous session, in the previous session, we talked about sustainability and the Sustainable Development Goals and self-help groups. A broad theme which was brought to life by some unique experiences and insights into how that can actually take place, how it actually occurs, and the realities that are faced by those engaged in the sustainable process. Well, one of the manifestations of sustainability today is, of course, the green economy and work that is going on the green economy. And this is particularly important because I think in many ways some of our extreme views on the green economy would suggest that we have more or less destroyed our planet. We have come to a situation where a recovery from it may be too late. And that means that the future generation, the youngsters over here, might actually inherit a planet which is not necessarily worth living. But is that a likely scenario? Could that be a possible scenario? I don't know the answer to that. I'm not a specialist either as a scientist or indeed as a sociologist or economist on the subject of the green economy. But I'm concerned as to whether we can overcome the ravages that we as humans have caused in the name of development, in the name of technology, in the name of progress all around the world. But the green economy is particularly crucial and critical for developing and emerging economies, like India in my view, because on the one hand there is this huge pressure for all countries of the world to address this question and maintain a front on the green economy, create green economies, and on the other, the relentless pressure, on economic development per se, which sometimes does not sit comfortably with ideas and philosophies of the green economy. How can the two be reconciled? There is so much pressure on, for example, getting rid of coal as an industry, and especially by developed economies, even though the coal industry in the largest bastion of capitalism, the United States, and the second largest bastion of capitalism, China, the coal industry is well and truly flourishing. So coal drives an enormous amount of our economies, but it's also a highly polluting energy source. So how do we manage and reconcile the two in terms of the future? That may be an issue which our speakers might take up in one form or another. Now, firstly, it's about ensuring that we have a green economy strategy. But the green economy strategy has to be sustainable. And that means it has to be developed, strategic choices have to be made in what we have and what we pursue, how we allocate economic resources efficiently and effectively. And in that role, entrepreneurship can play a significant part. Because the purpose, one of the particular purposes, economic purposes of entrepreneurship, is to be able to allocate economic resources as effectively as possible and as efficiently as possible through the creation of new goods and services and the formation of new organizations which are enabled to develop these new goods and services. Are those new goods and services themselves going to be sustainable? Are they products and outcomes of the green economy? Or are they simply about generating something new in the process of change? And a third dimension, I think, in the session might be that we are very aware of the fact of the explosion of data and data management. We are bombarded at the civic level and the social level with data. We are bombarded at the commercial level, business level, and we are bombarded at the political level with data of all kinds. Fake, real, but nevertheless data of all kinds. And the effects of that are incredible. Usually, you will know from many of the situations that have occurred in the very recent past in India what happens when fake data circulates so widely amongst people and the reactions that it actually generates. What happens when fake data is used as a means to control and, in a sense, divert people's attention from the realities they face. So data management, especially in the sense of a sustainable economy, in the sense of a sustainable green economy, means that we need real understanding of what data we generate, what data we store, where do we store it in a sustainable fashion, how do we retrieve the data so that we can use that again in a sustainable, recyclable form, and also essentially how do we use it and then reuse it on a constant basis, particularly to support the purpose of innovation leading to the green economy. I think we've got three excellent contributors to help us with this endeavor, again addressing micro-level issues in conjunction with macro-level issues. Imtiaz Ali, who is the Secretary and Project Director of Sept Vikas Avam. Your contributions, particularly in development research activities on sanitation and environment-related issues, would be really worth listening to, because sanitation is such a huge issue, despite of Swachh Bharat. And I was reading Arun Jaitley's article the other day in the Times of India, and he suggests that the sanitation problem has been solved, which I was very pleased to hear about.
He must come to Goa then.
Sorry?
He must come to Goa.
He must come to Goa, okay.
River, for instance.
I think he needs to just visit India as well. Not just Goa. But anyway, it was quite revealing, the power and passion of his Swachh Bharat resolution of the problem that he himself seems to have resolved single-handed with our Prime Minister. But anyway, we'd like to hear how you are addressing it. Mahesh Patel, founder director of the NGO Eco Farms. Very interesting stories, I think you will have to tell us about spice plantations, organic farming, and how that was generated, how your ideas were created, and where it's actually sort of leading to. And then, of course, a significant academic contributor, Pranav Mukhopadhyay, professor of economics and director of the Internal Quality Assurance Cell at Goa University. So who else could paint a better picture in economic terms around the question of the green economy and sustainable data management than he, sitting here in Goa and identifying both the theories and the practice which enable the theories to be illustrated and be informed than he himself. So I think we're in for a very good session. But first of all, in my time-honored fashion, I'm not going to give the floor to the speakers. I'm going to give the floor to you and ask you who would like to describe and explain what is a green economy. There are plenty of people in green as well here. Could we have one volunteer, please, or two? What is your idea of a green economy? You can go home. You want a contribution? Yes, please.
But every time I'm only speaking to you, one mind.
I mean, that is fantastic. You speak for the country.
Green. What is that? Green?
What is a green economy? Not blue, not red. What is a green economy?
Now, whereby jobs and value has been added to the economy of the nation without destroying nature, by preserving nature, and by keeping people in the villages and not uprooting them to an extent where they are forced to leave the villages, the rural areas, and go to cities in search of employment and business opportunities for their livelihoods.
Okay, that's excellent. Two strands in your explanation. One is about in keeping with nature, jobs and services and goods and products which do not destroy our planet. And secondly, the second part was, can you repeat that?
Reduced out migration.
Oh yes, reduce
They're going to cities.
migration, urban migration from rural areas to urban areas, and by enabling planet Earth to be much more fulfilled in rural areas. Great, fantastic, thank you. Yes, another contribution at last. Thank you.
Well, just to throw keywords, it's more of using renewable energy for our power needs.
Focusing on renewable energy, okay, as a energy source. Yeah, one more.
Creating more of.
Everybody wants to hear you.
Yeah. It could be creating more of zero waste products for the economy.
Okay, so here we are moving on from the more general perception to very specific contributions: renewable energy, zero waste, recyclable,
Yes.
cradle to cradle idea.
It should be a community effort, like how the Raika honey or like Amul of Fab India, so all community coming together. And also second point is it should be organic growth. So if you are trying to scale up the organization, it should be organic without increasing overheads. Yeah.
Okay, so the green economy cannot really be called a green economy unless it's community-based, community-driven, and that the nature of that growth has to be organic.
We have development on one side, but at the same time it should be eco-friendly and sustainable.
Eco-friendly development. Okay. One more, one last one. Thank you. Let's go quickly right to the end.
A paperless economy?
A paperless economy. You have paper in your hands. Okay, a paperless economy. So we are now down to specifics. And it's probably a reflection of the fact that when we talk, we need to be aware of what we are actually necessarily saying or propagating when we talk about a paper, holding to a lot of paper while we're talking about a paperless economy, etc. No reflection on you, personal reflection on you at all. Okay, so you've got some feelers about what people's perceptions and views are on the green economy and sustainable data management. Maybe more on the green economy side, but you can pick up on that. And so on that note, we will get started. So I will now come back to you. And I think we will be starting with Imtiaz Ali. And your contribution now on, let's see how sanitation has improved, or what you're doing about sanitation in India. Thank you. Just be supported by.
आप सभी को मेरा नमस्कार। मध्य प्रदेश एक हिंदी भाषी प्रदेश है और वहीं से हूँ, तो शायद मेरी हिंदी से कुछ लोगों को परेशानी हो, तो उसके लिए मैं पहले ही आप लोगों से माफ़ी चाहता हूँ। हमने 2007-8 में एक छोटा सा एक प्रयास शुरू किया था। एनजीओ के बारे में ये कहा जाता है कि जब उन्हें कहीं से फंडिंग मिलती है या गवर्नमेंट सपोर्ट करता है तब वो प्रोजेक्ट को शुरू करते हैं। हमने एक जीरो बजट प्रोजेक्ट की भोपाल में शुरुआत की और उसमें कोशिश ये की गई कि जो कचरा बीनने वाले हैं, जो हमारे द्वारा फेंके गए कचरे में से अपनी काम की चीज़ों को चुनते हैं और अपना और अपने परिवार का पालन पोषण करते हैं। 2007-8 में सुप्रीम कोर्ट के गाइडेंस पर 20 माइक्रोन की पतली पॉलीथीन बैन की गई। 2011 में 40 माइक्रोन, 2016 में 50 माइक्रोन, 2019 में आते आते 80 माइक्रोन बैन की जाएगी। तो बैन होने से पहले व्यवस्था ये थी कि जो भी प्लास्टिक या कचरा बीनने वाले बीनते थे वो कबाड़ी वाले को बेचते थे, वो कबाड़ी वाला उन्हें रिसाइकलर को देता था और रिसाइकलर नए उत्पाद बना के बाजार में ले आता था। लेकिन जैसे ही ये व्यवस्था खत्म हुई और 2008 में इन सारे यूनिट्स पर बैन लगा दिया गया थ्रू पॉल्यूशन कंट्रोल बोर्ड, तो स्थिति बड़ी भयावह हो गई। अभी 4 साल पहले आपने देखा होगा चेन्नई में बाढ़ आई, उसका मुख्य कारण वो प्लास्टिक ही था। तो ऐसी ही एक बाढ़ भोपाल में 2008 में आई और भोपाल के जो निचले बस्तियां थी वो जलमग्न हो गई। उसी टाइम हमने एक सर्वे किया भोपाल में कि भोपाल में पर डे लगभग 15 से 20 गायों की डेथ सिर्फ इस पॉलीथीन से हो रही थी। एक एक गाय के आमाशय में से 20 से 22 किलो के पॉलीथीन के गट्ठे निकल रहे। साथ ही जो अर्बन लोकल बॉडीज हैं, इनके पास स्टाफ की कमी थी और स्टाफ की कमी होने के कारण ये लोग इस पूरे कचरे को कॉलोनी के किसी कॉर्नर पर ले जाकर या शहर के बाहर ले जाकर जला देते हैं, जिससे कि फ्योरॉन और डाइक्सिन जैसी जहरीली गैसेस पर्यावरण में आती है। अब इस व्यवस्था को देखते हुए हम लोगों ने भोपाल के अंदर एक प्लास्टिक वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट रैक पिकर्स अपलिफ्टमेंट प्रोजेक्ट शुरू किया और कोशिश है कि शासन से कोई मदद नहीं लेनी है। तो जब हम शासन के पास अपना प्रस्ताव लेकर गए थे कि अल्लाह मदद हमारी चाहिए नहीं, और जिस पॉलिथीन को आप डिस्पोजल करने की बात कर रहे हैं वो पॉलिथीन पर तो बैन है, तो शासन ने हमें काम करने के लिए मना कर दिया, किसी भी तरह की सपोर्ट से मना किया। हम लोगों ने एक 10 बाई 10 का टाट भट्टों का एक कक्ष बनाया और वहां पर इस पतली पॉलिथीन को इकट्ठा करना शुरू किया और मध्य प्रदेश पॉल्यूशन कंट्रोल बोर्ड के माध्यम से हम लोगों ने सीमेंट प्लांट्स में इस प्लास्टिक को एज ए अल्टरनेटिव फ्यूल यूज करने के लिए एक ट्रायल रन किया और ट्रायल रन हमारा सक्सेस रहा। जब 800 डिग्री टेम्परेचर पर इस प्लास्टिक को बर्न किया गया तो इसमें से डाइक्सिन और फ्योरॉन जो थे वो रिलीज हुए, लेकिन जैसे ही इसे 1200 डिग्री टेम्परेचर पर बर्न किया गया तो फ्योरॉन और डाइक्सिन जो थे वो जीरो हो गए और इसकी कैलोरिफिक वैल्यू जो थी वो कोयले से 3 टाइम ज्यादा थी। तो इंडस्ट्रीज को कोयले का एक अल्टरनेटिव, तो इस तरह से हमारे भोपाल मॉडल की शुरुआत हुई। अभी 5 जून को यूएन ने इस पर एक छोटी सी डॉक्यूमेंट्री बनाई है 2 मिनट की, सर्वप्रथम मैं वही आपके सामने दिखाना।
I'm just going to intervene and ask someone to just do a summary for those of you who may not have a facility with Hindi.
Yeah, so quick one. In terms of I'll go through the summary of the points that he referred to. So in till 2008, there was no regulatory ban in terms of the way the fragile polythene recycling economy is working. Because of the ban in 2008, that fragile economy kind of toppled, and then subsequently what happened? The municipal waste, wherever there are plastics, they have been burning without any incinerator or proper arrangements. And Imtiaz and his colleagues that did a survey in MP, they found that there were animal deaths, particularly cow, because of this polythene being consumed by some of these animals. And then they took up this project of creating an alternative system of polythene recycling within their own means, because of this ban on polythene, the local body were not able to support them in terms of their venture. So their venture, they started in terms of polythene being collected through local community-based initiative, and they created a system of, I think it's a pyrolysis probably. It's a controlled burning of polythene to create alternative fuel. Thank you.
कचरा बिनना शुरुआत कराऊंगी। 6 बजे से घर से निकलते हैं, पन्नी, कागज, प्लास्टिक, पुस्ते, कांच वगैरह ये सब पूरे टोटल सामान हम लोग उठाते हैं। पन्नी जो पड़ी रहती थी जो गंदी, वो उठा के हम लेते थे। व्यापारी लोग क्या बोलते थे, भाई गंदी पन्नी है, आधा वजन काटो, आधा वजन के पैसे तुम लोगों को मिलेंगे। पहले लोग क्या बोलते थे, आप लोग सामान मत उठाओ, कॉलोनी में से बाहर निकल जाओ। फिर हमारा तो नगर निगम से जब बना हमारा, तो हमको कोई लोगों ने मना नहीं करा। लोग बाग बोलते आओ बिन के ले जाओ।
जो रेवेन्यू मॉडल इसमें तैयार किया गया है उसमें रैक पिकर्स को इन्वॉल्व किया गया है। रैक पिकर्स को एनजीओज ने अलग अलग केंद्र स्थापित किए हैं और रैक पिकर्स का पंजीयन कराया गया है और उनके माध्यम से रैक पिकर्स से ये पॉलिथीन इस तरह की प्लास्टिक क्रय की जाती है अलग अलग दरों पर। रैक पिकर्स की जो डेली इनकम हो रही थी वो दुगनी हुई है उसमें।
नगर निगम में जाके हम पूरी पन्नी देते, हमारा कोई वजन काटती नहीं, हमारा कोई कुछ भी नहीं काटती।
ऐसे पॉलिथीन का प्रबंधन करने के लिए यूएनडीपी, जैफ, एसडीपी के माध्यम से हम लोगों ने ये परियोजना प्रारंभ की है। इस परियोजना का मुख्य उद्देश्य कचरा बीनने वालों को रोजगार के अवसर उपलब्ध कराना है, साथ ही ऐसा पॉलिथीन जो कि नॉन रिसाइकलेबल है, जिसको ना तो रिसाइकल किया जा सकता और ना ही स्टोर किया जा सकता, ऐसे प्लास्टिक को एकत्र करके सड़क निर्माण और सीमेंट इंडस्ट्रीज में एज ए अल्टरनेटिव फ्यूल यूज करने के लिए हम इस परियोजना का संचालन कर रहे हैं।
पेपर में मेरा बच्चा पढ़ा कि मम्मी तुम लोग ये पन्नी बीनते हैं ना, पिसाती मशीन में पिसा के ये रोड में ये पन्नी डलाती है।
ये भोपाल मॉडल हम लोगों ने जो बात की थी, आज जो हमने 10 बाई 10 के कक्ष से शुरू किया था सफर, आज इस भोपाल मॉडल को स्वच्छ भारत मिशन ने अडॉप्ट किया है और भारत के लगभग 100 शहरों के अंदर इसको रिप्लिकेट किया गया है। और गोवा के अंदर भी इसी महीने इस प्रोजेक्ट की लॉन्चिंग हुई है और गोवा म्यूनिसिपल कॉर्पोरेशन के थ्रू यहाँ पर इस प्रोजेक्ट को लॉन्च किया। इस प्रोजेक्ट का हमारा मेन मकसद यही है, उद्देश्य यह है कि कचरा पे सर्वप्रथम किसका अधिकार है। अलग अलग जगह पे नई टेक्नोलॉजी आती है, रैक पिकर्स को अलग करके टेक्नोलॉजी की बात की जाती है और टेक्नोलॉजी जो होती है कुछ समय बाद जाके वो फेल होती है। तो रैक पिकर्स पर कचरे का अधिकार हो और रैक पिकर्स को इससे रोजगार मिले और म्यूनिसिपल कॉर्पोरेशन रैक पिकर्स को लेके सॉलिड वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट की बात करें। इसी एक लड़ाई को लड़ते हुए हमने 2007-8 में गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया से एक पूरी गाइडलाइंस बनवाई। उसी गाइडलाइंस के बेसिस पे मध्य प्रदेश गवर्नमेंट ने गाइडलाइंस बनाई और एक रोड मैप बनाकर हम लोगों ने प्लानिंग कमीशन को दिया। प्लानिंग कमीशन की टीम भोपाल आकर इस पूरे प्रोजेक्ट को देखा और तब हमारे राज्य शासन की नींद खुली। उन्होंने फिर हमको भोपाल में 5 इस टाइप के सेंटर्स बनाकर दिए और आज पूरे मध्य प्रदेश में 79 कलेक्शन सेंटर हैं, जिसमें 19,000 कचरा बीनने वाले, जिनकी आमदनी पहले महज 70 से 80 रुपए थी, आज जो बढ़कर 350 से 400 रुपए हो गई है और उनके बच्चों को भी पिकिंग से निकालकर एजुकेशन और मैनेज स्ट्रीम में जोड़ा गया है। जो आप एक फोटो देख रहे हैं कि लगभग अगर आपको अपने शहर के अंदर गौशालाएं हैं, वहां अगर आप देखेंगे मृत गायों को जहाँ फेंका जाता है तो वहां पर आपको बोन्स कम दिखेंगे और पॉलिथीन की गांठें जो है वो ज्यादा दिखेंगी। हम लोगों ने भोपाल में एक शुरुआत की थी, 19 जोन थे हमारे, 84 वार्ड और लगभग 20 लाख की आबादी को ध्यान में रखते हुए हम लोगों ने 5 कलेक्शन सेंटर प्रारंभ किए। हमने 3200 रैक पिकर्स जो थे वहां भोपाल में आइडेंटिफाई किए। वर्ल्ड बैंक कहता है कि जो अर्बन पॉपुलेशन होती है लगभग 2% जनसंख्या उसमें ये रैक पिकर्स की होती है, तो इसी को हमने टारगेट किया और इसी को हमने म्युनिसिपल कॉर्पोरेशन का एम्पावर करने के लिए शुरुआत की। तो इसमें लगभग मैक्सिमम 85% जो है वो वुमेन्स होती हैं जो कचरे को बीनती है, महज 20% लोग जो हैं वो मेल हैं। तो हमने लगभग 3200 रैक पिकर्स को अपने साथ लिया और भोपाल में इसकी शुरुआत की। इनकी कॉलोनियों में जाके, बस्तियों में जाके इनका ओरिएंटेशन किया, इनकी बैठकें की, इनके सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप बनाए, इनके आइडेंटिटी कार्ड इश्यूज करे। हम लोगों ने फिर कलेक्शन सेंटर शुरुआत किए। कलेक्शन सेंटरों पर जो पतली पॉलिथीन है जिसको कबाड़ी वाला नहीं लेता था, उस पॉलिथीन को लेना हम लोगों ने शुरू किया और साथ साथ जो दूसरा प्लास्टिक जो रिसाइक्लेबल है उसको भी यहाँ पर इस सेंटर्स पर हमने लेना शुरू किया। एक पूरा प्रोजेक्ट सेटअप बना पॉल्यूशन कंट्रोल बोर्ड के माध्यम से। मध्य प्रदेश की 12 सीमेंट प्लांट इंडस्ट्री का हम लोगों का एग्रीमेंट हुआ और जो पतली पॉलिथीन जो कि किसी काम की नहीं थी, आज वो सीमेंट इंडस्ट्रीज के लिए एक अल्टरनेटिव फ्यूल हुई है। और एसएससी कैमोड जहां पर हमने इस प्रोजेक्ट की शुरुआत की थी, वर्ष 2015-16 में सिर्फ 54 करोड़ रुपए का कोयला उन्होंने प्लास्टिक को बर्न करके बचाया है और कार्बन इमिशंस को रोका है, वो है।
We had a few interesting points. I'll quickly run through. So this model that he was referring to is the Bhopal model. So that's now been replicated across 100 cities in the country, including Goa, through a partnership with the local body. So and in 1 year, the year of their launch, they have handled 8,500 so far, 8,500 tons of single-use plastics or plastics that cannot be recycled through the existing means, and saved 12,000 tons of CO2 emissions. And the innovation component in there, if you really look at, it is not take only solution. It is inclusive of the rag pickers, because they are the biggest and the most critical stakeholder in the system, in their entire system. And in MP alone, this Bhopal model, through Government of India policy intervention, the 79 centers in MP and 19,000 rag pickers are involved. So their economics have changed from a daily income of 70 to 80. So now they have gone up to 350 to 400. And 85% of them are women. What Imtiaz and team have done, they have built their capacity. They have created SHG groups, and they've been issued ID cards and the costume, etc. And interestingly, they have also connected for a dedicated market, which is the cement industry. In 1 year alone, 54 crore worth of coal is being saved through that dedicated marketing arrangement.
हम लोगों ने टेक्नोलॉजी भी बहुत ही सस्ती की, क्योंकि हमारे पास बजट नहीं था, तो हम लोगों ने ये फटका मशीन डिजाइन की कि जो पॉलीथीन जो गंदी होती है, अनहाइजीनिक होती है, उसको इस मशीन के थ्रू आप जो देख रहे हैं कि डस्ट जो होती है उसको अलग कर देता है और पॉलीथीन अलग कर देता है। 80,000 रुपए की मशीन हम लोगों ने यह मैन्युफैक्चर की और आज ये सभी सेंटर्स पर है और मध्य प्रदेश ही नहीं, इंडिया के सारे यूएलपी आज इस मशीन को डिमांड कर रहे हैं। एक मशीन क्या एस्टैब्लिश की, दूसरी एक बैलिंग मशीन हम लोगों ने बनाई, क्योंकि पहले हम पॉलीथीन को बैग्स में भर के सीमेंट प्लांट्स ट्रांसपोर्ट करते थे, तो ट्रांसपोर्ट कास्ट हमारा काफी ज्यादा आता था। फिर हम लोगों ने बैलिंग मशीन, कंप्रेशन मशीन के माध्यम से 100 केजीज के बंडल्स बना के सीमेंट इंडस्ट्रीज को भेजना शुरू किया, जिससे हमारा जो ट्रांसपोर्ट कास्ट था वो लगभग 65% जो है वो कम हो गया। इसी के अलावा शेडर हम लोगों ने अपने सभी यूनिट्स पर लगाया हुआ है, जहां पर हम इस पतली जो बैन प्लास्टिक है इसके 2.4 साइज के चिप्स बना के हम रोड कंस्ट्रक्शन में इसका यूज करते हैं। मध्य प्रदेश में पिछले 5 सालों में 3,222 किलोमीटर प्लास्टिक से रोड बनाए गए हैं, जो कि पूरे इंडिया के अंदर सबसे ज्यादा है और इससे कचरा बीनने वालों को रोजगार तो मिला ही है, साथ ही जो लोकल कॉर्पोरेशंस की जो पॉलीथीन की जो प्रॉब्लम थी वो भी इसके थ्रू सॉल्व हुई है। साथ ही अलग अलग स्टेट के डेलीगेशन टाइम टू टाइम आके इस भोपाल मॉडल को इंदौर और भोपाल में आकर देख रहे हैं और अपने अपने अर्बन लोकल बॉडीज में इसको रिप्लिकेट कर रहे हैं। हम लोगों ने पूरा एक इसमें सिस्टम अप्रोच मैप बनाया हुआ है, किस टाइप का पूरा सिस्टम है, कैसा रैक पिकर्स का इन्वॉल्व करना है, कैसे उनके आइडेंटिटी कार्ड्स इश्यूज करना है। भोपाल में पहली बार हम लोगों ने गवर्नमेंट कमिश्नर के साइन से रैक पिकर्स के आइडेंटिटी कार्ड इशू किए। जिन रैक पिकर्स को पहले रैक पिकर्स, कचरा चुनने वाला, कचरा बीनने वाला इन शब्दों से जाना जाता था, आज उनको रैक पिकर्स ना कहते हुए सार्थक कर्मी का नाम दिया गया है। गवर्नमेंट ने इसके लिए नोटिफिकेशन जारी किया है और सभी को सार्थक कर्मी के आइडेंटिटी कार्ड्स थ्रू कमिश्नर साइन ये वहां पर दिए जा रहे हैं। 3 स्टेप्स के अंदर हम लोगों ने इस पूरी परियोजना को शुरू किया। फर्स्ट स्टेज में हम लोग रैक पिकर्स का सर्वे करते हैं, फिर कलेक्शन सेंटर एस्टैब्लिश करते हैं, फिर वहां पे मशीनें, साइकिल, रिक्शा, ये सारी चीजें। लोग पूछते हैं कि इतने कम बजट में, जब आपके पास बजट नहीं था, तो ये प्रोग्राम इतना आगे बढ़ा कैसे? तो उसका मैं आपको एक चीज बताऊंगा कि हमारे यहाँ जो भी डेलीगेशंस आते थे अलग अलग स्टेट्स के, हम उनसे एक ही चीज पूछते थे कि आपने हमारे प्रोजेक्ट को देखा है, तो इस प्रोजेक्ट के अंदर कोई एक कमी बताइए आप। तो जो भी ग्रुप आता था हम उससे कमी पूछते थे और कमी पर बैठकर हम लोग फिर बहुत देर और दिनों तक उस पर एक मंथन होता था, चर्चा होती थी, उस कमी को फिर पूरा करते थे और इस तरह हमारी कमी दूसरे लोग बताते गए और ये प्रोजेक्ट आगे बढ़ता गया। जो एक शहर से जो काम शुरू हुआ था आज वो कई शहरों के अंदर शुरू हुआ। बांग्लादेश के ढाका शहर में भी इसको रिप्लिकेट किया गया है। फिलीपाइंस के पास एक इस्टमोर कंट्री है, वहां पर भी मॉन्टोटो शहर के अंदर इसको रिप्लिकेट किया गया है। सऊदी अरबिया के अंदर इसको रिप्लिकेट किया जा रहा है। अभी हमने जो हमारा प्लास्टिक है, जो बैन प्लास्टिक है, इसको हम लोगों ने वॉश करके इसके कुशन्स बनाए। जो महिलाएं ऐसी थी जो एजेड हैं, जो कि पैकिंग के लिए नहीं जा सकती थी, उनको हम लोगों ने इस टाइप के कुशन्स बनाना शुरू किए हैं। काफी अच्छा हमारा ये ग्रुप जो है काम कर रहा है। 15 ग्रुप हमारे ऐसे हैं जो ये कुशन्स बना रहा है। इसी के अलावा हम लोगों ने जो कंस्ट्रक्शन वेस्ट मटेरियल है इसको प्लास्टिक के साथ मिक्स करके और लगभग 120 सेल्सियस पर गर्म करके हम लोगों ने पेवर्स और ब्लॉक्स के बनाए हैं, जिसकी कीमत भी जो है 12% कम है और जो सीमेंट कंक्रीट के जो पेवर्स बनते हैं उससे इसकी लाइफ भी जो है वो 3 टाइम ज्यादा है। इसी के अलावा प्लास्टिक के बैग्स पर बैन होने पर हम लोगों ने पेपर बैग और कॉटन के बैग को भी वहां पर प्रमोट किया है।
Yeah, a few more points. Another innovative component, I think, is the machine that you probably saw on the screen. So this is their own, I think, rural innovation or grassroots innovation, where they incorporated all of these, and made a machine worth 80,000 rupees. And they have also introduced composting and shredder machines as and when the value demanded, so that they reduce significant amount of cost. And the introduction of ID card with the local government that helped in terms of rebuilding the dignity of people who are involved in rag picking. And then they simplified the model and make it a replicable model, which there are a lot of visitors who come and they can actually take it and implement it wherever applicable. And it is a low-cost, simplified model. A lot of exposure visits, and through feedback they have improved and fine-tuned the model, which is a good learning for a lot of startups. That's what he is probably referring to, that you can optimize on the resources that you have. And the last one in terms of product diversification. So they have also made sure that not only the alternative fuel is the only route. They have also came up with alternative models where these plastics can be reused, like let's say plastic cushions, the cushions, and the paver blocks, which can be an alternative to concrete blocks, which is cost efficient and better. And his innovation, this Bhopal model, along with the rest of the elements, they've been replicated internationally, including Bangladesh, East Timor, and Saudi Arabia.
हम लोगों ने प्लास्टिक की शीट्स बना के प्लास्टिक फर्नीचर को ही प्रमोट करने के लिए एक यूनिट है जो मिक्स प्लास्टिक को हम लोग जो है शीट्स बनाकर उससे फर्नीचर बना रहे हैं। इसके अलावा हमने एक नया इनोवेशन अभी 2 साल पहले किया है कि जो सैलून और पार्लर से जो बाल निकलते हैं, बड़े बालों के तो विगिंग में यूज हो जाता है, छोटे बालों का यूज नहीं होता है और इसको डिकम्पोज होने में भी बहुत समय लगता है। तो ऐसे बालों को डाइल्यूट करके हम लोगों ने इसका प्रोटीन्स रिकवर किया है, क्योंकि बालों में 95% जो प्रोटीन्स होता है उसको रिकवर करके हम लोगों ने इसका एक ग्रोथ प्रमोटर्स तैयार किया, जिससे कि हम मध्य प्रदेश के अंदर ऑर्गेनिक फार्मिंग को प्रमोट कर रहे हैं, साथ ही ग्रामीण क्षेत्रों के अंदर इससे रोजगार भी उपलब्ध करा। हम लोगों ने कंपोस्टिंग की फैसिलिटी भोपाल में शुरू की है। 50 रुपए से लेके 10 लाख रुपए तक की कंपोस्टिंग फैसिलिटी हम लोगों ने भोपाल में शुरू की है। भोपाल के अंदर कॉलोनी घरों तक के अंदर आपको कंपोस्ट बनाते हुए दिखेंगे। इस तरह की नेट कंपोस्टिंग, जो वेस्ट ड्रम्स निकलते हैं, ड्रम्स को हम लोगों ने कंपोस्टिंग में यूज किया है। इससे हम लोग लिक्विड कंपोस्ट और सॉलिड कंपोस्ट दोनों बना रहे हैं। ट्यूबुलर भी हम लोगों ने वहाँ के रिलीजियस पैलेसों के अंदर लगवाकर वहाँ जो मालाएं निकलती हैं, निर्माल्य निकलता है, उससे भी हम लोग कंपोस्ट बना रहे हैं। और इस पूरे प्रोजेक्ट को टाइम टू टाइम पे मीडिया ने लोगों के सामने रखा और लोग हमारे प्रोजेक्ट से जुड़े और जुड़ने के बाद उन्होंने इसको सपोर्ट किया, जिसकी वजह से आज भोपाल और इंदौर जो है हिंदुस्तान के सबसे स्वच्छ 2 शहर पिछले 2 साल से कंटिन्यू आ रहे हैं। और इंडिया के जो 100 बड़े शहर हैं उनमें से 22 सिटीज ऐसी हैं कि जो मध्य प्रदेश की हैं। तो 2007-8 में जो प्रोजेक्ट हम लोगों ने शुरू किया था, अब उसके रिजल्ट दिखना शुरू हुए हैं और इससे लोगों को रोजगार भी मिला है, साथ ही हमारे शहर भी साफ हुए हैं। और जो कचरे की जो एक प्रॉब्लम्स थी उसको हम लोगों ने काफी हद तक जो है सॉल्व किया हुआ है और 95% कचरा हमारे यहाँ जो है वो एट सोर्स सेग्रीगेट होकर कलेक्ट हो रहा है और उसका फाइनली साइंटिफिक डिस्पोजल हो रहा है। हम लोगों ने भोपाल, क्योंकि कैपिटल है, बीच बीच में यहाँ पे बड़ी बड़ी गैदरिंग होती है। भोपाल के अंदर एक रिलीजियस समागम होता है, इसमें 20-22 लाख लोग इकट्ठा होते हैं 3 दिन के अंदर। तो वहां पर भी प्लास्टिक कलेक्ट करके हम लोगों ने एक मॉडल क्रिएट किया है कि वहीं पर एक कलेक्शन सेंटर हम लोग बनाते हैं। और पहले ये व्यवस्था थी कि वो आयोजन समिति जो इसका आयोजन करती थी वो पूरे कचरे को जला देती थी। तो पिछले 3 साल से हम लोग उनके पूरे कचरे को मैनेज करते हैं और 4 से 4.5 लाख रुपए उस कचरे से इनकम कर हम उस आयोजन समिति को देते हैं, इससे उसका खर्चा भी निकलता है और पूरा का पूरा उनका वेस्ट जो होता है वो भी फाइनली डिस्पोजल हो जाता है। इसमें छोटे छोटे इनोवेशंस करके हम लोगों ने वेस्ट को रिड्यूस करने की भोपाल और इंदौर के अंदर कोशिश की है। और इस जैसा मैंने बताया कि नेशनल इंटरनेशनल अवार्ड इस प्रोजेक्ट को टाइम टू टाइम मिले हैं और जो मैंने बताया कि हिंदुस्तान के सबसे साफ 2 शहर भोपाल और इंदौर वर्तमान में हैं। और हमारे 3 कमिश्नर मिस्टर मनीष सिंह और MP सिंह, इन सब की टीम के साथ हम लोग भोपाल इंदौर में तो काम कर ही रहे हैं। इसके अलावा और दूसरी यूनिवर्सिटीज के अंदर काम कर रहे हैं। पिछले महीने माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने भोपाल मॉडल का लखनऊ के अंदर पूरा अवलोकन किया और इंडिया की सभी सिटीज के अंदर इस तरह के मॉडल को रिप्लिकेट करने के लिए अनुशंसा की है। इस प्रोजेक्ट के थ्रू हमारा ऑब्जेक्टिव सिर्फ ये है कि कचरे पे जिनका अधिकार है उनको उनका अधिकार मिले और कचरे से जो इनकम है, रोजगार कचरा बीनने वालों को मिले और अर्बन लोकल बॉडीज में जो भी वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट के प्रोजेक्ट स्टार्ट हो उसमें रैक पिकर्स को इन्वॉल्व किया जाए। इन्हीं शब्दों के साथ मैं अपना प्रेजेंटेशन
Just quick few points. So short pieces, their innovation did not stop only at the plastic level, so they went to the next level in terms of the short pieces of hair. So they started picking it up and monetize it by ways of extracting protein, and then composting, another monetizing avenue. And Bhopal and Indore, their contribution to make them the cleanest cities in India by way of all those interventions that he referred to. And then 22 cities out of 100 big cities in India, they're in MP, and they're contributing significantly to make all of them much cleaner. And monetizing waste, I think that's their innovation. The last but list, not the list, is national and international award.
What a fascinating story, and how wonderful to see all of the stories evolving from one stage to another, and particularly from the previous session and indeed the morning sessions. This is a story not just about individual entrepreneurial heroism. This is a story about a society which is entrepreneurial. A society which is entrepreneurial in the sense of what it has actually done to change the lives of people. People who are considered in many parts of the country and in many parts of the globe probably as being the lowest of the low in terms of their economic activity, rag picking. But the outcome that has taken place over here is benefiting not particularly the rag pickers, and in ensuring that the rights of the rag pickers as people, the human rights of their ability to earn a living, to earn respectability, to demonstrate that the work that they do has a significant economic and social purpose, that has been made possible by PSG's project. And for this alone, I think he deserves many more awards. And perhaps you should have been writing that piece in the Times of India rather than the Ministry to actually say where real change is actually occurring. Because one of the things about the green economy and sustainability is not just simply affording a green environment, an ecologically healthy environment, but fundamentally ensuring that the rights of people, the ability to extricate themselves from the lowest possible levels of economic and social presence in society can be made possible. A new dream can be realized. So thank you very much, Mngmt, for your presentation. We move on now to Mahesh Patel. Mahesh Patel, as I said earlier on, is the founding director of NV Eco Farms, and you will be telling us your story about.
In fact, I would share my small journey which I have gone through as a part of this green economy. A morning session was an interesting one where they said you have to have a vision, mission, or some said you do not have any vision, but you need to go ahead. So as I'm addressing the young entrepreneurs and my experiences, I also did not have any mission or a vision, but only there was a passion to do something more or learn. I think what you need to start with, you need to have passion in what you need to do is. So as my background, I come from a very small village in Goa, from agriculture family, and as my father was a progressive farmer, he wanted me to do agriculture. So I did a graduation, post-graduation agriculture, and what next? Look out for a job, because our farm is managed by my parents. So the next best thing to happen is I got a job, and we wanted to be in Goa. So you can see this map of Goa. So either we had two main industry. One is the tourism, not had picked up, but not to the extent what is today, and second was the mining. And I got job in one of the prominent fertilizer factory in Goa. So what I was doing, I was selling fertilizers for making my living. But in those days, there was no such awareness of organic farming, eco-conservation, sustainability, because I joined in 1989. But after 2 years, and it was the best thing to happen because the company was paying good salary, position was good. But after 1 year and so, I realized I was just doing a marketing, and somehow I did not go well with my boss. I don't like him, the way it was working. So I said I had to quit. And then the second thing what happened was second industry is again was called as a mining. I joined one progressive company called the environmental engineer. I wasn't aware what I could do, but fortunately you can see this was the scenario then. So in this mines, I don't want to go again more detail, but again when I went there, the issue was They asked me, what you can do? I said, I don't know. I can only plant and make the green. That was a basic agriculture background I had. Fortunately, the management was very concerned and forward-looking. So I could do a lot of work. And then again I said, it's a passion which I had to do whatever I can learn. The knowledge is most important. And then I started this work called geotextile. Well, I'm also telling you how the entrepreneur you can do it. So there's something called Choir Board in Kerala, appeared one advertisement. They have called Bhuvastra. I wrote them, they came back, we studied for 3 years and developed this model of total geotextile. Now as a big entrepreneur in Bangalore is manufacturing this on a very large scale. It did two things. One, we developed an entrepreneur, but here in Goa, large dumps, erosion what happened could be controlled. This was an environmental sustainability for the mining. You know, mining, better not to talk at this stage, but what's happening there. And then there was a pit, which was a big pit of the water. Did a work with the Goa University, NIO, National Institute of Oceanography. We did a lot of study. 3-4 students have done MPhil on this project, where I was supposed to be a co-guide, converted it into a recreational pond, a fish pond, and surrounding full agriculture. This is a mine reject dam I converted. Again, thanks to the management who gave me the support to do it. But at the same time, but what I'm trying to tell you, this knowledge of getting work done, how it helped me today. See, again, I was looking for a new innovation and new knowledge. This is the Honorable Minister Suresh Prabhu. He has an NGO called Conback just across Goa. He was Rajya Sabha member. He was, in fact, after the lost ministry, he was nowhere. But he was so accommodative. I just wrote a mail to him. We started talking. And this is the first bamboo structure constructed 15 years ago. Till today it is intact. Today this Conback is doing a huge project across the globe. Now they are going very big. But we started journey together. This is in Goa. You can always go to Sakli mine of Goa and you can see. Then you asked me, when I was doing so well, why I came out. The journey was that learning and exploring. I was something doesn't happen as you plan. There was a lot of change in management happened. And again, there I left because of my boss. Here the overall management philosophy was not the way which I wanted. So then, what next best you can do is, I had a passion for development for nature, conservation, and I was in charge for entire India as well as doing a project in Africa. So, got a lot of opportunity to learn and understand. So, many people suggested you have a farm, and then in the meantime, the parents who are looking after my property, they were not there. So, there's also additional responsibility to maintain a small farm. So, agro-tourism or spice plantation, which most of you know, is giving a lot of money. So I went, a couple of people asked, what is the best thing? He said, you have a farm, you have spices, get the elephant. So elephant is something which, everybody, huge demand. But I have realized, elephant, how much feed it requires and how much dung it generates. It will become a white elephant. You understand what is white elephant? To manage that. So that was the issue. Second, so then what I did is, I did a study and started working on what is the agro-tourism concept. So NV Eco Farm was born with whatever experience I had earlier of community engagement, CSR, and inclusive growth. Because my company, where I was working earlier, I started as an environmental engineer and I was a vice president sustainability. So I looked for safety, environment, CSR, health, and community engagement in India as well as abroad. So we said this is a model which I want to share with you is agro-ecotourism. It's not a spice plantation, what is quite popular in Goa, but we are talking about the green economy and sustainability of the project. So we said the local empowerment, there will be food, technical processing, farming, cultivation. At the same time, you need to have a local people involved. What is sustainable development is, you enhance or conserve the natural resources, at the same time passing the benefit to the local community. So based on we developed a model, minus elephant, and then we said we'll implement it. So again we said with good money, because you need to know also the fallback or the failures. I started doing this and we said money will flow. Of course these are other avenues what I thought, and money would come. It doesn't happen. Because when you go to the market, in spite of my corporate experience of 25 years, what I realized is you need to the nitty-gritty of business, because I was working for somebody else. Money was not an issue. Issue is only a passion, you learn and do it. Here, you have to manage both. You know, when you work, whatever boss you fire, but 31st you can go to ATM and withdraw your money. When you are entrepreneur, on 20th, you set butterfly in your stomach because you have to pay for people. You can keep them hungry. They will not work for you. So in the process, what happened? Typically, many of you at Goa, so you would know, we have a, I'm not criticizing, but the tax is an issue. And they would demand a commission. And then some of the business model which have commission is fine, you can negotiate. Some are giving beer to them, liquor. I said that is not ethical. I wouldn't give up beer or a liquor to my taxi driver who would get my gas. And that's a basic training what we had. So that was a big issue, just setback for me 2 years back. I couldn't just take it on. Commission as well as the other issue. So what I was thinking, I was then, in the process where this entire developed, I developed my farm, invested money. You can see we have spice plantation. We have started going organic. So I just went to totally organic. We have a restaurant. I started conserving water. You know, the natural going stream, we convert to swimming pool. A stream, we convert, started water harvesting. And the natural stream will get throughout the year. So with the minimum impact on the local flora fauna. This is a nakshatra was which I learned as process of my earlier job. It was useful for me. Develop some adventure activities. Then birds. I've realized there's a huge market for the birds. The young entrepreneurs, even you take as a passion, today is no more a passion, it's a full-time, high-paying profession. Morning 6 to 9. Then birds go out, even you can do your other work. This is what we started doing it. We also developed a butterfly park. Well, that is what I try to get more knowledge, and I had that information with me. Then we get the wooden cottages. This recently I have developed. But after all investing this, the issue was, this I told you, getting customer. You get a feedback, but you don't get the return on investment is very low. So start working on, I just something else you have to do. So I tied up with some, this is the latest. So what is the alternative route to get people? Spoke with many entrepreneurs and started a boat cruise. You know, very next to here is upon Dona Paula, along the Zuari. And my farm is located 6 kilometers away from a place called Panchavadi. So spoke with the people, started, then again I sang. Everybody gave an excellent review for me. So I said, that's where I'll start making money. Business, what happens? Suddenly the boat owner sold his entire fleet to some other person, the new person not interested in boating at all. I lost 1 year. So this is what happens in business. Nevertheless, again next year we spoke to the like-minded person. Now this, my friend of mine has a boat and we study where I failed, what best you can do. We started working this cruise from now Old Goa. You go to Mandavi, then you have Kumarzoa Canal, which is known for its crocodiles, birds, mangroves, and you come to main Zuari and go up to Panchavadi. This we are launched now commercially, and I believe long term there is a big scope. However, as an entrepreneur, you can see all activities. Bird watching is an activity. You are specialized in crocodiles, you get a lot of business. You can do mangroves. You are do angling, crab catching. There are huge amount of activities one can do as a part of agriculture. Now, since I started my career as chemical fertilizer marketing, there was no much awareness. Today, the huge awareness on organic, and that is a business trend one can catch. So I started a distributorship of biofertilizer, biopesticide, as well as doing vermiculture at my farm, and I'm marketing and promoting organic farming Goa. Now everywhere you say, huge demand for the organic products. So with this, because I want to manage within the time, it's my short journey from where I started and today we are. I wouldn't call it a very successful entrepreneur, and his journey is on, but I had a very successful corporate life. I was a vice president, getting fat salary, good money, global exposure, staying in the best of the hotel. But when entrepreneur, like morning what we said, is you get satisfaction. You can employ so many people and do something good for the community as well as nature. So this green economy is sustainable. Now mining, as I said, my first experience, all mines are closed in Goa. You must be reading, and many of the Goans are aware. When they restart the mines, there's a scope. Converting this entire mining pit into water bodies. Pisciculture is more than 10,000 hectares area available which mined out. You can just plant cashew plantation, You can have successful entrepreneurs everywhere. You can create a huge job. Technique is available, knowledge is available, and it's a local product. Again, as a geotextile, to reclaim those down, we can use it largely. So there are a host lot of opportunities for you to get into the entrepreneur, and younger you go, better it is. But one is you need to have passion, and vision will follow. Learning, networking, and knowing more things. With this, once again, I thank you for giving this opportunity to share my few thoughts. Thank you. Thank you, Ashikaji.
Once again, it's not often that you hear a personal story of a conscious decision to move into the green economy, to be participant in the green economy, not simply as an employee of a large organization with all its manifold permutations and combinations, but as an entrepreneur, as a green entrepreneur. A sense of mission, but really driven by passion to actually make something work, to make something happen, because the possibility is there, the opportunity is there, and the ability to effect change through that process where few things are happening is quite remarkable. A very personal odyssey from your side, Manjushbal. Thank you very much for that. I now turn to our third and final presenter, not last but not least. Pranav Mukhopadhyay, Professor of Economics and Director of the Internal Quality Assurance Cell of Goa University. So I suppose we will now find a broad academic insight into the green economy and its fortunes. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mitra, my colleagues on the dais, honorable guests in the audience. A few weeks back when Professor Savita Kerkar, who was on her chancellor's office, dropped by because she was waiting for her appointment, said, there's a Bengali group in Goa and they're organizing a conference. Do you think, since you're Bengali, why don't you come and speak there? So I thought it was one of those occasions where, people out of nicety, come and ask you out of courtesy that why don't you be part of a event that is part of your cultural heritage, etc. So it's excellent to know that this is a vibrant group, and I thank Savita for inviting me here. But, as work happens, one hopes that, you can postpone your presentation to the last day and come up with something interesting to say. And sitting in the audience this afternoon, I had this sinking feeling that, like the student who was postponing his studies till the day before the exam and suddenly realizes he has this exam next day and has not done his homework. So that's what I was feeling when I came in after lunch. And as I heard all the presentations, I realized that I am an academic, and as Professor Mitra said, a broad overview of an academic overview. So there's a positive thing to that, and there's a not so positive thing to that. I don't know how many of you watch cricket, but very often you will hear Harsha Bhogle say, if India had won the toss, then maybe it would have batted first and won the match. However, that's an academic question now, which means that there's nothing real out there. It's just a matter of curiosity. If it had won, things would have been different. So, as an academic, that's the part of the whole ball game. And unfortunately, amongst academics, economists have very little to say. And those of you who are economists in the audience, please forgive me for revealing this truth that people go to economists to ask, what will happen if in the economy 5 years from now, or should I invest in this stock, or is it worthwhile, putting my money in some real estate? And fortunately or unfortunately, economists are the last guys we should go to, because we are good as pathologists. Once an event is over, we'll give you 5 reasons why that happened, and and that's my learning. So after something is over, disasters happened, some crazy crisis has happened. You come to me, I will give you 5 reasons why that happened, and I'll also tell you why. If you had done something differently, something different might have happened. So it's really, we don't really contribute to anything that's going on in the real world. And it's really nice to see the people who are making the difference in the world hold the main part of the audience, part of the entire engagement today. And I really feel like a fish out of water here because there is this great expectation of this last speaker to say something really interesting, and I don't have anything interesting to say because I don't do any interesting work. So when during the tea break, Mr. Bhattacharya said, "You have a presentation." I don't have a presentation. I'd much rather say something which I have learned over my last 20-25 years of engagement with people who do real work in this world, and learning from what they have taught me in various things in the green economy. And I begin with a small story which has always intrigued me. I used to be a student in Delhi, and I had a friend, the husband of a professor of mine, who said, in your summer break, what are you doing? So I said, I'll probably go home, meet my parents, and said, take a week, come with me. That wasn't me. So come with me, I'll go show you the real world. And that was Dunu Roy. I don't know if that name rings a bell here, but he used to work with the People's Science Institute in Dehradun. And they had some projects that they were intervening in places like Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, etc., where they were working with people to try and engage them in developmental work. I mean, if you think of, the word economic development, it is in the late 80s, early 90s, it was still the state. The state would invest in irrigation, the state would invest in green revolution, the state would do this. The engagement with people and allowing them to be part of the developmental journey was somehow relegated to the work of the NGOs. It was not seen as entrepreneurial work. It was not seen as something that people would do it in large numbers. So when I went with him, I realized that he was working with people who had probably dropped out of school in class 5, who were managing small farms, but then were trying to increase their productivity by using standard irrigation techniques, but the state investment was not large enough for them to gather the water and build ponds, etc. So how do villages themselves intervene in those economies? And he was training them to build dams. And when you think of dams, don't think of the Sardar Sarovar, think of these small little water ponds that store water for maybe a few weeks of the summer months, where they can build their get a crop of vegetable and double their cash incomes from crops. And that really opened up my eyes to the developmental trajectory, the challenges that India faces in terms of its own green economy, because these were people who were not building dams, displacing people who were in lakhs and thousands of people, but this was empowering people, making them entrepreneurs, making them use their local resources with local talent, and finding sustainable solutions. And I think I take back that story in many ways, because that is the story that India has to look forward to if we are thinking of sustainable development in this country. It's not going to happen at the grand scale where planning is going to make it happen. It's got to happen at the local level with local intervention and with local participation and resources. So that's I think one of my learnings from my fieldwork. The curious thing about this session was that it's labeled green economy and sustainable data management. Now again, when Savita gave, we were having this conversation, she said it's a session on green economy and sustainability. So when you think of green economy and sustainability, I do dime and dozen, conferences on sustainability and green economy. I didn't read the fine print till Professor Mitra and Amitabh Bhattacharya sent me a note 2 days back saying, there are 5 questions which we are thinking of, and one of them is on sustainable data management. I said, oh Lord, now what? I understand sustainability, I understand data management. What's sustainable data management? And I was trying to think of ways in which you can ask that question, because for an empirical economist, if you don't have data, you are, quite useless in this world. And data in India is very hard to come by. Let me clarify what I mean by that. If you look for economic data, we have a very rich set of publicly available data sets in the public domain, free of cost. So if you're looking for national income data, if you're looking for monetary data, India is a great place to do research. You have 50 years of time series data on various variables available to you, free of cost. You can download it, you can do your research. You go beyond that, and you go into the domain of the green economy as variously defined by you, and you start looking for data on water quality. You start looking for data on air quality. You start looking for data on soil. And I don't know how many of you work in those areas. My problem has been that it's like a big Great Wall of China. Soil data is conserved like defense data. River flow data from the Central Water Commission is almost impossible to get. So how do you do research? Meteorological data now is available. It's extremely expensive. So unless you have a World Bank project, it's very hard to do, empirical green economy research in India. And I think part of the challenge of intervening in the debate on sustainable development is the fact that we can only talk in theory because empirical work is extremely hard to do. And the reason why India, which is one of the leaders in the Asian continent as far as scientific research is concerned, is a laggard in the World Research Forum, is because this data is just not there. You compare it with, let's say, the American system where you go to the NOAA site and you'll get data not for the entire world. Anything that they collect, they put it in the public domain. And that makes a huge difference. Till some years back, and those who work on GIS data, satellite imagery was almost impossible to get. In fact, I used to go trekking when I was much younger and I could walk long distances. And when you walk along the Himalayas, you're very close to the border. And for calculating heights and distances of travel, you would need those the grid maps. And you go to the GSI and ask them for those maps, and they'll say they are covered under border areas. You cannot get those maps. And so we would ask our friends to get it from the US Library of Congress, scan it, and just send it to us. So somehow, somewhere, there's a huge disconnect between our academic and research needs and what we think are our national defense priorities in terms of hiding data, because we feel that if we put it in the public domain, it will go into the wrong hands. Unfortunately for us, data, for those who really want to use it for the wrong purposes, is there for them to use from many other sources. I mean, NASA has been putting out satellite images for so many years, and Google now gives you high-resolution digital images very, very easily. Indian, research organizations like Bhuvan is putting it out now, but you've lost 20, 30 years of good research time over the years, where we could have contributed to many of the urban challenges that are facing us today in terms of zoning, in terms of regional planning, etc. So I think data. I mean, I'm very glad that you put those two words in there, the data management as part of our sustainability debate. But if we think a little further on that, who would manage that data even if we were to put it out there? I mean, there are issues of data security, as you said, fake news, etc. But as long as we know that there is an authentic source from where we can access that data, for example, there's no fake news about GNP. There's no fake news about national income. It's there. We rely on RBI. We rely on the Central Statistical Organization. We go to their website and we download that data. Similarly, for meteorological purposes, if we know that we will have weather predictions 3 days, 4 days in advance of fairly, reliable nature, we would be accessing those sites far more regularly than we do, let's say, access Weather AccuWeather or Weather Report, which are not our domestic sites. Why should that happen? I mean, we have very, very big investments of taxpayers' money going into collecting that data. It should be available to citizens of this country to use because it's for a public purpose. It's not for a private purpose. So I think, sustainable data, data management and placement of data in the public domain is critical in terms of any kind of planning for the green economy and sustainable development in this country. So that's one side of what I wanted to say. The other side of what I wanted to say is that those of you who are thinking of being entrepreneurs, especially in Goa, you would note, I mean, I had a slide on this, but I can very easily describe it. In the last 20 years, we normally describe as three sectors in the economy as the agriculture sector, the manufacturing sector, and the services sector. The tourism typically falls under the services sector. It's a big contributor to our state domestic product. Mining falls under the manufacturing of the secondary sector. Sometimes it's classified in agriculture, but for most purposes it's manufacturing. You would notice that agriculture has gone almost touching your horizontal axis in terms of the proportion of contribution. Services sector, which we think is the really big sector, has been coming down over the years, in the last 20 years. And what's been going up is the manufacturing sector. And so, as an entrepreneur, if you're looking at this chart and you're saying, where is my business gap? Then I would think that all three, of course, have gaps, and for micro enterprises, there's always an opportunity as long as you have a new idea. I think where Goa's natural attraction is in its natural capital. And as a development economist, especially because I'm an economist, I'm always asked that, isn't there a clash between preservation of natural capital and the creation of faster growth? Now let's remember that Goa has the highest per capita income in the entire country. It has been that way for the last 2 decades or so. It also is one of the fastest growing economies in the country. And we are, given a few years, our state of well-being will be fairly close to one of the lower European countries. The question we need to ask ourselves is that, do we need to push the growth pedal so hard? In the sense that, how fast should we grow? Because growth along with it brings along various challenges. And one of those challenges is everything that we talk about: urbanization, pollution, and associated problems of urbanization that I'm sure most of the audience here is aware about much more than I am. So my challenge as I see it, and my opportunity as I see it, if I was a business entrepreneur, is to think along the lines that Mr. Mahesh Patil has been talking about, or Mr. Imtiaz Ali has been talking about, because urbanization brings with it business opportunities. And these are not just in the creation of more flats or more interior design projects, but these are in the way of greening our economy, reducing our use of resources, reusing them and recycling them. And that's part of the green economy project, that you are putting a lower pressure on the resources of the earth and at the same time trying to maintain a reasonable amount of growth. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, sustainable development is about not creating new capital, but preserving and transforming capital. And this can happen in significant ways in different fields. It doesn't have to take the form of a machine, it doesn't have to take the form of a car. It can take the form of a coconut tree, it can take the form of a water resource being regenerated, which sustains life in a water-scarce region. And so if you look at agriculture as an opportunity, and this is something we've been working on for a completely different purpose, we normally think of farmers producing crops, and that's it. And I'm glad Mr. Miguel Braganza is here. He's probably wondering what I'm going to say next, but there's a very strong argument that is now being placed that farmers, in addition to what they produce as crops, also generate ecosystem services. And I know that Professor Mitra has been using that term. In the corporate domain, ecosystems mean something. But in the domain of ecological services, the ecosystem services are real products and services that aid human well-being. And some of them are marketed, and some of them are not marketed. And a large component of it that comes from agricultural landscapes is actually not marketed. So there was this study done, there's this deep study which is done globally, part of the ecosystem and biodiversity valuation studies, which placed a value of about $3,800 per hectare per here as the amount of ecosystem services emanating from agricultural landscapes. This included some provisioning services and some cultural services like tourism, food, but it also included a large number of non-marketed services like supporting services and regulating services. Beekeeping, I heard the presentation by Mr. Riker. That's part of the ecosystem services that emanate from agricultural landscapes. And that value is actually pretty large. And if you find a market for that, to actually capture that value, you can not only double your farmer's income in India, you can actually triple it. And so there is this proposal floating around that if you were to cut down the entire amount of agricultural subsidy that is being given in the form of subsidizing chemical fertilizers and pesticides and redirect it to farmers for switching their farming techniques to what are known as eco-friendly farming techniques, to just generate three kinds of green targets: soil conservation, water restoration, and carbon sequestration. That three targets alone will allow you to market ecosystem services that double or triple your farmer's income. And I think that the opportunity lies here for entrepreneurs who want to use the very large landscape in Goa, which still continues to use a fairly low chemical farming technique, and has the opportunity of seizing this if it does come about as a public policy. So, if I can stop now and take questions, that would be great. I had a set of notes, but I'll leave it for later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, when he started his presentation, I was tempted to think of a famous remark that was once made about economists, and I was in the audience when that remark was being made, that we don't need guys like you. You don't need an economist to tell us about the economy. And I wondered whether, as an economist, he was going to be as humble as that non-economist at that particular presentation. But fortunately, and thank you for that, he changed the dynamics of his talk quite remarkably, with his very measured and very focused presentation on looking at what really matters in the broad green economy landscape of ours. And what really matters in terms of recalibrating not only opportunity in the way that we see opportunity emerging, that is in terms of the traditional use of capital, land, labor, whatever you might wish to look at, but quite often not just in seeking new ways in which you can generate value from that capital, but quite often, and therefore use and abuse it, but sometimes in the preservation and transformation of that existing capital, and thereby replenishing it, which is of course at the heart of any kind of sustainability mission. So capital, as we use it in traditional economic terms, is primarily about its use and its unconscious abuse. But capital in terms, use of capital in terms of green opportunities and the green economy is primarily in terms of preserving and transforming existing capital. If only for that new accumulation of capital, not the kind of traditional accumulation of capital as we know it in capitalist economies, but an accumulation of capital through its preservation, not just in the generation of something sort of new. So that was one thing which I very much appreciated. And the second point was that in order for that to happen, you cannot rely simply on traditional forms of policy making. That is absurd. So there's an obvious asymmetry between identifying an opportunity in terms of how you use capital and then finding policies which are completely out of sync with that particular goal and vision. So changes in policy towards ecosystem targets, it can possibly allow for that asymmetry to be reduced at least. So these were, in my view, particularly pertinent comments that you made. And I think I'm glad that you addressed the question of data and sustainable data management, because I think that was probably missing, because we were expecting a specialist on that area to be here with us, but unfortunately he couldn't from the US at the last minute, because clearly he was losing some data which he had to retrieve very quickly before his capital was being lost. So unfortunately he couldn't be here with us. But I think the point about the sustainable data management today is, to some extent, I agree with the points that you made about what data is really available in the economy. The data that matters to us, the data that matters at the local level, is not available in the Indian economy. Data which is broad, which is macro, which quite often hides the real truth. You mentioned about GNP and GDP data. It may not be fake data, but it's fake design, as we know it, which quite often generates unreal data, data which does not reflect the reality, both in terms of what we count, the metrics that we actually use, but how often we redesign the metrics for their use. But sustainable data management, I think the point here is that sustainability is very much a grassroots endeavor. Sustainability is not a top-down endeavor. And one of the advantages of technology today is the ability to generate and store your own data and to circulate it within the communities that you work with, that you serve, and that you're part of. And I think it's not just a matter of creating more apps, it's a matter of designing apps in such a way that you can collect data at almost every level of economic or social endeavor. And I think that is possible. I think increasingly more of technology is being created to enable that to happen. And the interesting thing is that data is not necessarily just in the hands of Google or just in the hands of Facebook. This is data that can be actually created and recreated very much at the local level. But for that to happen, two things obviously need to be in place. And that is not the function of government or other big institutions to enable that to happen, but very much at the local level. If government can support that, great. And this kind of sort of data management technique, this kind of a learning about how to create data from the work that you do is quite phenomenal. And the power behind that can actually enable a lot of people at the grassroots level to be able to work with stories, with actual empirical data, with the possibility of creating sources of information which lie directly in the hands of people. And that is the kind of sort of data that I think is necessary. Because I do not think that we can effectively make change occur by relying on the wider level of macro data, the data that is easily accessible in the public domain. What is possible in terms of making change happen is what data we can produce very much at the local level. And there is technology now to enable that to happen. The question is that we should be aware of it, and I hope our universities, especially our universities, are able to encourage young people to be aware and conscious of these technologies and how they could use them in a variety of different forms and apply them in their quest for sustainable economic and social endeavor. So thank you very much for that. We are left with about just under 10 minutes, I think, for any observations, questions, and comments.
Quality consultant in Goa and Ladakh. One of the, Mr. Imtiaz Ali, this is directed towards you. What you're doing is phenomenal. It is so amazing, and it is so inspirational, so motivational, the way you put together your whole project in these last 10 years. Did you, at the beginning, मैं हिंदी में बोलता हूँ, शुरुआत करते टाइम क्या आपको ये लगा कि आपको प्रशासन से या गवर्नमेंट से इन सब से एक हिंडरेंस मिला कि आपको रोका गया कि इस चीज़ में मत घुसिए, वो मत करिए, ऐसा मत करिए? क्योंकि मैंने जहाँ तक सुना है कि एक बहुत गार्बेज एक माफिया सा बन गया है, तो इसमें आपको कुछ बताना चाहिए.
So the question was that has Imtiaz faced particular hindrances and obstacles from government and other public institutions, and indeed the rag mafia, if you like, which sometimes attempts to control the nature of that kind of sort of industry and keep the poor where they are.
Thank you. आपने जो कहा, मेरे साथ गवर्नमेंट एक्सपीरियंस था। मैंने 12 साल गवर्नमेंट में काम किया और वहाँ से VRS लेके इस प्रोजेक्ट में आया हूँ। नंबर 1। दूसरा ये कि जब मैंने प्रोजेक्ट स्टार्ट किया, जो मैंने बताया कि एक टाट फिट्टो का कक्ष बनाया था, तो मेरे उस प्लांट पर 3 बार बंद करवा दिया गया म्यूनिसिपल कॉर्पोरेशन के थ्रू, ताकि ये प्रोजेक्ट वहीं पर बंद हो जाए। तीसरा, गवर्नमेंट ने कोई सपोर्ट नहीं किया। तो जब प्लानिंग कमीशन की टीम आकर देख कर गई कि MP में कुछ हो रहा है, तो वहाँ पर प्रॉब्लम्स काफ़ी आई। लेकिन एक आप में इच्छा शक्ति होनी चाहिए। अगर वो है कि मुझे करना है, और मैं जिसको अपना प्रेरणा स्रोत मानता हूँ, नानाजी देशमुख, उनका एक कथन था कि मैं अपने लिए नहीं हूँ, अपनों के लिए हूँ, और अपने वो हैं जो पिछड़े एवं उपेक्षित हैं। तो अगर आपके मन में उन रैक पिकर्स के लिए एक भावना थी, और मैंने अपना पूरा जीवन उनके लिए देने का एक वचन किया अपने आप से, तो जब इच्छा शक्ति आपके पास होगी, तो मैं समझता हूँ कि कोई भी ऐसा काम नहीं जो आप नहीं कर सकते। जिन ऑफिसर्स के पास में उनके चैम्बर के वहाँ 3-3 घंटे वो वेट कराते थे, जब देख लिया कि अंदर बाहर खड़ा है तो बुलाते ही नहीं थे। एक टाइम वो आया कि वो मेरे सेंटर के बाहर 3-3 घंटे खड़े रहे।
Just in case somebody did not follow. So what he said, of course there were hindrances, but he was so passionate and kind of honesty of purpose that that nothing really stopped him from doing. And he anticipated that because he was in the government system. He took voluntary retirement from his government service before he dedicated his life and passion into this particular segment, because he was keen to uplift and work for the purpose of betterment of the quality of lives for the rag pickers. And people who were huge hindrance for him to take forward his work, made him wait for hours together when he needed their help. In turn, when the coin flipped, they had to wait for him for a couple of hours, so that they get entry to get to see what change he's making. So I think that's the story he narrated.
Thank you. This is a wonderful response in terms of learning about the wonders of being the enemy within, the benefits of being an anarchist once you actually get out of the system and change things. One last question, please. Yeah.
I'm speaking from Goa-centric point of view.
And please say who you are.
Yeah. I'm Marianne Lobo-DeMello, a consultant for psychosocial development, but I wear another hat as well. I am trainer and admin for I Create India at the Goa Center. I'm speaking in relationship with Goa, so it's very Goa-centric. If you go down to Vasco da Gama every morning, you will find travelers who have come down from the trains, teams and teams of them. Where they go, what they do is another question. That's one issue. I have been told that the majority of these people are coming from Jharkhand and from Bihar. Again, where they go, what they do, how they manage is another question. I don't know whether the government is looking into this. But as far as sustainability is concerned, I mean, that's one big question. Second question is that Goa is being promoted worldwide as a tourist destination paradise. Yet Goa lacks the basic infrastructure and the facilities, even very, very basic ones like washroom facilities. So Goa says Swachh Bharat and things like that, but the washroom facilities, if at all, are portable ones, which are generally locked. So people have the other option of doing your business just anywhere and making a mess of things. Are the teachers or the lecturers who are taking tourism courses at various colleges really involved and engaged with the tourism policy for Goa? And if so, like what would be the focus areas?
Can we limit it to those two
Okay,
questions?
okay.
Yeah. The time is very short. I'm sorry to cut in over there. Any of you wish to make a response, Pranav or Mother Mahashini, or do you want to make a quick response to the question? A very broad question here.
I would just make a response because it's a government policy which won't come in. But I'll respond to you as the people come from Jharkhand and the sustainability. I can tell you, Goa, migrant laborers are very high, and we don't have a Goan people working for the type of the job what we have. Maybe tourism, even agriculture. At my farm, located very close to the, Darbandora, which is towards the Western Ghat village, I got 6 families of Jharkhand working in my farm for last 2 years. But I don't get Goan laborers. It's a reality that we require labor to do the work, and those people are coming. Earlier we used to get from Bihar. Bihar reduced now. Now it's only Jharkhand and Assam people are coming in. The rest is a policy decision which, you're not able to come in.
Pranav, do you want to comment?
Considering that I'm a migrant myself, it's really appropriate that I address that question. Ma'am, you'll excuse me if, I see the concern that you have, and the concern is that we are a country with such disparate per capita incomes across that if you have a state which is very hospitable to with 10 times the per capita income of another state, there is no way apart from physical barriers that you can stop people from coming here. And no one would come here if they didn't get employment. So this is not, even though Supreme Court has, I think the Chief Secretary has to pay a fine for not having a home for homeless here. But people who are coming here in search of employment, and they're getting it. So somewhere, we need to find a way to manage that. I think the challenge is management, and I think that the concern that you raise has many dimensions to it, and it's not an easy one to answer in a quick response from the floor or from the stage. And the second one was about tourism destination and its management. Again, if you compare, we were looking at, let's say, Bhutan and Goa as 2 comparable destinations, and if you look at the way Bhutan manages its tourism as opposed to Goa, it's a very different scenario. They control the number of people who actually come in, and they set a target of how much you need to spend per day in order to be there. It's a different model. It's a command and control model as opposed to a laissez-faire model in Goa. But those are decisions which, as an academic, I can only bring to public notice, but somebody else has to make that call.
I hope this one will be a useful academic contribution.
They usually are.
I think that's where we come to an end. Thanks for that comment.
Professor,
I would say,
Professor, one question last for Imtiaz Ali Sahab.
A very quick question,
please.
Okay?
Yeah.
Please, go on.
Imtiaz Ali Sahab, I just want to ask you, as you started growing, जैसे आप बढ़ते गए आपके काम में, जो मशीनरी लगी आपको, वो इसके लिए कोई साइंटिस्ट है डिजाइन करने के लिए, इंजीनियर्स है, क्या वो खुद में अपना एक्सपीरियंस है आपने और आपकी जो टीम है उसने?
So did Imtiaz ji involve scientists, engineers, technologists in the making of his machines, or did he design because he's such a creative genius?
देखिए, कहा जाता है ज़रूरत आविष्कार की जननी होती है, तो हमें लगा कि हमें अपना ट्रांसपोर्ट कॉस्ट कम करना है, इसको प्रेस करना चाहिए, तो प्रेस मशीन बनाई 1.5 लाख की, जो मार्केट में मिलती थी 10 लाख की। हमें लगा प्लास्टिक को क्लीन करना है, तो क्लीनिंग के लिए वाटर ट्रीटमेंट प्लांट और ये सब लगाने से बेहतर है कि एयर वाला ब्लोन बनाया जाए, तो उसको बनाया। तो बस लगा कि ऐसा कुछ करना चाहिए। इंजीनियरिंग में थोड़ा बहुत कुछ काम किया था शुरू में, तो ऑटोमेटिकली मशीनें बनती गई और उसमें कुछ जो प्रॉब्लम्स थी, फिर हमने इंजीनियरिंग के लोगों से बातचीत करके फाइनली उसका फिर जो स्पेसिफिकेशन होना चाहिए साइंटिफिक, वो सब फिर बात देखिए उसको।
So the inspiration for his machinery was essentially in the practice, in the doing of things, and in the making of things in order to reduce costs, in order to make things work more efficiently, and then of course to try and validate it. Was that a warning signal? And then to validate it through experts in the, and Pranav, I'm sure you will appreciate that there are some wonders in the microeconomist in entrepreneurs and how they realize economic opportunity, and look at again in terms of how they allocate their own resources. within the constraints of an organization and make things work. So I think that's where we will end this very interesting session, which went from rag picking through to an overview of an economist in terms of actually arguing the case for making changes where it matters most. In each of these cases, especially of Imtiaz and Manish Patilji, there's a dedication towards making things work in different ways, in improving the lives of people. Not simply in finding an opportunity for oneself, but finding an opportunity for others who can actually benefit from that particular change. And I think Pranav rounded it up very nicely by saying, well, policy, if it's got to be effective, green opportunities, if they have to be realized, need to be able to address changes in the form and in the manner where it matters most, rather than in terms of broad brush overviews about the economy as it stands. So thank you all very much. Show of appreciation to the audience for your participation as widely as possible. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Professor Mitra. Thank you, Imtiaz, Professor Mukhopadhyay, and Mahesh. And ladies and gentlemen, so we are at the fag end of the first day. I think it really went quite well, isn't it? Yes. Very well. Very happy.